He who knows not his history is bound to repeat it. Now, in that particular phrase, some would think that he who knows not his history is the most important part. And I'm not attempting to say that it's not. However,
it is important.
Oh, yes. But I would like to concentrate on the word bound for a moment, because its common usage is to mean that something is likely. You're likely to do something. You're bound to do something. But its etymology is linked to the word boundary. And bound, defined, is a territorial limit, restricted or confined. So if you're bound to do something, you're restricted. So if we're talking about your history, and if you don't know your history,
and if you do not know your history,
you're restricted to making the same mistakes
again and again and again.
Which is the huge importance why we need to create accurate history, but also a narrative. And I know this is something close to your heart, Mr. Parker.
Yes, yes. It's one of the things that motivates me to do this, so that generations that come before me will have something to reference to. That maybe what they were told, there's more to it, and they can find the truth, or a truth that's more truthful. And I see it around me every day, not just in blacks. We are doing it in America also. We have cut out some truths that happened in a period after the Civil War. Well, it was started before the Civil War. It's called a period of Reconstruction. And in fact, in our government hall today, for instance, to give you the best example, our Congress has gone into an act of simply not doing its job. And it's a tactic. And this tactic was used in the government that was created after the war in the 1800s, where blacks had made great political strides, social strides after slavery. And what happened was the obstructionist Congress came into play. In our government, it's a three-pronged government. You have Congress, Senate, presidency. And now we see our Congress is obstructing. So any laws that this African American president, Barack Obama, purports to send through, they simply sit on it. Laws that would be good for the whole country. So we go back to the date when Barack Obama was elected. Much of the Congress publicly stated, for the next 4 years, all that we're going to do is attempt to stop this man so that he will not get reelected, but none of his new laws will pass. And that is exactly what has happened. And we must understand it's happened before. And in happening now, we know that we are all brothers in this country. The forefathers meant it to be so, whether we like it or not. DNA proves it. And I'd like the other young blacks to know it, and the young whites to know it, so that as they create their narrative for life, it will be based on a truth and not a lie.
Now, when people attempt to talk about black history, they're often referred to by some degree as being over the top. having somewhat fundamentalist views, trying to push ideas and ideologies. However, when white American Anglo-Saxon history is taught, it's just taken as gospel. And I think by doing this and attempting to create a narrative, we just all we're looking for is parity.
Yes.
To be able to talk about black history and for it not to be seen as something which is negative, something which is unsubstantiated, something which didn't exist. And there are some people who have a level of enlightenment and know that's not the case, but if I was to generalize, I would say the majority of people have that initial feeling, and even black people have that certain level of uncomfortableness talking about their history, but they will be more than happy to talk about history relating to what the white man has done. And one of the interesting things that you said a couple of days ago was that history is written by the victors.
It has always been so.
And therefore, even though a lot of things are seen as 100% reliable sources, those sources are often biased.
Absolutely.
In favor of the victor. And it wasn't a situation where we were dealing with objective reporting at the time. So regardless of what the information that the person who was not the victor had, regardless of whether it was in favor or against the victor, it's not being reported. And that's the important thing that we're trying to talk about. Not necessarily that the black man has never been the victor, but the level of historical recollection, the availability of black history. Why is it a specialized subject? Why isn't it not an open subject like American or Anglo-Saxon history? Why do we have to dig so deep in order to get this information?
Yes.
And why is it so hard, so difficult for our youngsters to reconnect with who they are?
Yes.
Because as we said at the beginning of this particular video, he who knows not his history is bound to repeat it. So if you have no knowledge of what's gone before you,
you're going to take what you have and keep doing it.
There you go.
Or keep in that direction.
There you go.
Your narrative has been created and you move in that direction. However, you can change your narrative and point yourself in other directions. It will cause you to change internally how you feel about yourself and those around you. You will, for instance, if you're despondent about yourself, knowing the truth about yourself, your ancestors, your history in the country which you live can change the way you feel about yourself. Many blacks in this country are despondent to the point of turning their despondency upon each other. Take Barack Obama's hometown of Chicago. They have one of the worst cases of black-on-black murder rate of any city, state in the country. And people are saying, well, I don't know why. I mean, why are they doing this when so much is available to them? Well, it's like nutritionalist food. There's nothing in the history that they're being taught. And so, and they are told to go with that narrative that's shown to them, and they determine is something wrong with it. However, they don't have enough information to create their own narrative so that they can change how they look at themselves and their brothers around them.
And the difficulty which they have is this continuous onslaught via media.
Yes.
We've taken...
That the women are whores, that the men are pimps. And the truth of it is there is no discovery in this country. The filament in the light bulb, the iron that you love to use so much, the stove, the gas stove, so that it won't turn off on you and kill you in your home. The very important parts of those are all black discoveries. I mean, you don't know that.
No.
But it's written.
And by knowing that knowledge, you're not bragging.
Oh, it's not a braggadocious.
And this is the another issue. If you talk about something which is black related, you're often seen as boastful or bragging or trying to make a point. Whereas if the same thing is said by a white person, it's just taken as normal.
Yes, some knowledge that you add to ongoing history.
Now, I want to be clear. I want to go on record. This is not a anti-white propaganda
Not
piece.
at all. Not at all. Many of my people are white.
There you go. All this is trying to do is to create or establish a level of parity. And recently, I've heard a lot of people talking about races and race. Now, ultimately, there is only one race.
Only one race, the human race.
The human race. You could talk about ethnicity.
Ethnicity.
Colour. This kind of thing. But as Willie Lynch did in around 1712, and we've recently spoken about, you try to create distrust by outlining differences.
Yes.
Right? And in truth, there is no difference between a black and a white person.
If there were any difference, as far as racial difference, we would not be able to co-create as beings. I couldn't marry a white woman and have children by her.
Mm.
We would be sterile to each other. That's a basic definition.
Yeah. But, the only difference which we have is a slight phenotypical difference based on environment.
Where we were and for how long on this great globe of ours. Many of the distinctions you see in the different ethnic groups.
Now, a child said to me, in the last 6 months, she looked at me and said, "Why is your nose so big?" And I wanted to be as diplomatic as possible. And I wanted to give her, as a child, an as understandable definition and explanation as I could. But it wasn't until I came here and you explained the difference in noses and hair.
Skin shading.
Yeah. So would you like to explain the reasons why, in general, blacks, African Americans have this larger, wider nose, and similarly white Caucasians have the thinner nose?
Basically, it has to do with an environmental act. It's called glaciation. And 25,000 years ago, there was a glaciation period. I think 50,000 years before that.
Just to clear it, it's when like a glacier, like an ice age. Basically.
Yes, like an ice age.
Yeah.
And what happened with the human race as it was dispersing itself around the globe, some of the populations became trapped behind those glaciers for thousands and thousands of years. The first peoples that went out trekking around the world, they trekked out of Africa. All anthropologists agree with that now. All DNA science agree with that now. So what happened was this group of people who got trapped, in order to survive, their bodies began to adapt. Their noses became thinner. If you breathe frozen air in, it'll freeze your lungs. But a narrow nostril causes you to be able to heat the air a bit more before it gets to your lungs. Basically, that is how nature, our Mother Nature, has designed that. When you're in a warmer climate like Africa, and where man evolved, the nostril is going to be wider so that it can take in more air. You're going to have more melanin so that you can protect yourself from the open sun.
And for those who don't know, melanin is the pigment
the pigmentation
which gives coloration, but it's also contained in the eyes.
Yes.
And other parts of the body.
And it's also associated with disease fighting. We know that now.
Yeah.
And that's basically how differences occurred. Today, it's hard for us to think of it because we can circle the globe in one day.
Yeah.
But it took tens of thousands of years for man, as he evolved out of East Africa, to get to, for instance, South America. And he did it sometimes behind a glaciated period. And so his body changed to adapt. That's it.
And they're very, very minor differences. But ultimately, mentally, genotypically,
they have been accentuated and made negative so that the person who is wide nostril, dark skin can feel inferior.
Yeah. So if you look in the mirror and you see this supposedly big nose, which you're being teased about at school, it's going to affect your self-esteem. But if you knew that it was just, firstly, just normal, we'll
an adaptation.
An adaptation, and that's all it is. Just like how some people have different color hair, different color eyes, but be accepting and embracing of that by knowing your history and knowing who you are, then you would be a much stronger person mentally. And you may see all of these negative images of people, but again, it's propaganda. It's disinformation. It's an attempt to control and do what has been done for centuries
in this country.
So it's very, very important to know these things. To know who you are. If you take anything out of its natural environment, it's going to change.
Exactly.
It won't flourish in the same way that it would have. If you don't give it the right resources, the right information, the right encouragement. So if you are brought up in a poor area, you are predisposed
to not know your history.
To not know your history, but to achieve less.
Yes.
But then those people who are in a more privileged position are using these statistics and this information and these pictures to perpetuate the cycle.
Yes.
So you will be in a group, in a classroom, and because you're seeing all of these things, eventually, if you're a one black person in this particular room, you might start believing these things.
Yes, these negative images.
And you might go home and think, well, my black folk don't account to nothing. They don't mean anything. Let me go and take this white approach.
And they are the seed of human civilization.
Yeah.
The very seed. Civilization, man as he exists, cannot exist if the black man were not. Simple. And my desire is that the young black take new information about himself, no matter how ugly, but new knowledge about himself, new truths about himself, and alter his narrative. They don't necessarily have to change it. Those things that are positive, keep it. Throw out the things that are the lies, the deceptions, the ability to, the attempts to manipulate. But they can't do it unless they have the knowledge. And that they believe the knowledge.
These the things that we talk about are not just what old wives' tales. They're not just myths. These are things that have happened. Right?
We can take populations of certain rats, for instance. And if we deprive them of the environment we took them out of, we can change their eye color, their fur color, the way they behave. And with rats, since they have their generations are so short, within a matter of 10 or 15 generations, you'll have a totally different animal than you started out with. But you started out with a regular rat.
And that particular thing is exactly what's happened to the black man.
Exactly. And we are attempting to give him some tools with which to alter that. And that he can feel good about himself. Know that he has been part of every great thing in America. The stoplight, which every culture uses on this globe, was invented by a black man.
And you would
never know that. Some of the inventions that black men, especially when in this country we were in slavery, cotton gins, things like that, were taken from him, and the white master got the credit for it.
You spoke about Benjamin Banneker.
Benjamin Banneker is the man that the layout of Washington, D.C., it could not be without him, because there was a blow-up with the U.S. Congress and the Frenchman who they had hired, and who was Benjamin Banneker was apprenticed to. They had a blowout. The Frenchman went home. He just wasn't going to work on it anymore, and he had all of the maps that he had created. And at first they thought, well, God, we're going to have to get a new architect, and we've been working for so long and paid so much. But Benjamin Banneker stepped forward, and he said, I have all that knowledge. He had a photographic memory. So when you come to this country and you're touristing around Washington, D.C., and you're on the mall, remember, it couldn't be so without a black slave.
And also probably the most famous clock in the world, Big Ben, is named after Benjamin Banneker. But again, this is not something...
I didn't know that until you just said that.
This is true.
That is why
and you see,
he was given this honor.
And so when you speak with other people, and you have the aim and the goal to create a positive narrative. Look at this. We're sharing knowledge right here and now. So go out there and network. And
however, I forewarn you, you're dealing with a people that have been indoctrinated.
Yeah.
And they will literally fight to hold on to those ideas that have been pumped into their heads. If you put this truth before them, it can be a challenge.
It is. But don't be overwhelmed by the challenge.
Oh, no.
Always keep fighting. Always keep pushing
I've been
forward.
fighting with it for much of my life. I'm 62, some years old.
It's been a pleasure meeting you, Mr. Parker.
All the pleasure has been mine.
We will continue with recording and documenting our thoughts and findings. And for whoever listens in the future, love God, love yourself, love one another, no matter what the color.
No matter what the color. And remember, our Constitution was actually a constitution that the American Indian, a tribe of American Indians called the Iroquois, it is exactly based on that. Thomas Jefferson was exposed to the last of them, and one of them showed him their articles. So when you read our Constitution, which is always credited to a white man, know the truth. It was a red man They had evolved these ideas over a civilization that spanned it more than 25,000 years. Through two glaciation periods, that group of people had come to North America and they had stayed there.
Now, we also need to say that even though a lot of the things which we've referenced have been about America, this applies 100% to Britain.
Oh yes.
To England.
England is one of our parents.
Oh yes. If anything, America is just the child doing the work what the parents set, being Britain. The British-American Empire. So these things which are going on, these negative images which are being pushed forward, they're highly prevalent in the UK.
Really?
It's the effect on the black youth. The black
devastating.
People, it's devastating. But we won't dwell on the negative.
We're going to dwell on the positive, that we can offer people change.
And
true change.
True change. And the importance of this particular video is create a narrative.
Create your own narrative.
And remember, your history, your being is positive. And never allow anybody to tell you otherwise.
For that, I couldn't say it better myself.
Mr. Parker?
Pleasure. Thank you, sir.